The prison guard opened the wrong cell door and said, "Walk out now. Pretend you never saw me." "I don't understand," I said, not moving from my bunk. 3 years in Millbrook Correctional had taught me that nothing good came from guards acting outside protocol. "My release isn't until next month. The paperwork hasn't even been processed yet." Officer Denise Tran stepped into my cell, her hand trembling as she pulled a flash drive from her uniform pocket. "Your appeals lawyer Rebecca Stark was found dead 2 hours ago. Carbon monoxide leak, they're calling it. But she called me first. She'd found proof you were framed, Antonio." My blood turned to ice. Rebecca had been my lifeline for 18 months. The only person who believed someone had planted evidence to put me here for Prosecutor David Lang's murder. No witnesses, no motive, just my fingerprints on a letter opener and testimony from a jailhouse informant who'd vanished the day after my sentencing. Financial records showing payments to the lab tech who processed your fingerprints. Bank transfers from Judge Gerald Morrison himself, the same judge who sentenced you to 25 years. Denise's voice was barely above a whisper. Rebecca copied everything before they killed her. She was filing new motions today. Judge Morrison, the man who'd ignored every piece of evidence that could have cleared me, who'd allowed perjured testimony, who'd treated my trial like theater with a predetermined ending, the same man who'd looked my mother in the eye during sentencing and told her that her son was a cold-blooded killer who deserved no mercy. My mother, who'd worked 3 jobs to pay for my defense, who'd sold her house to cover legal fees, who'd believed in my innocence even when the evidence seemed overwhelming. "Why are you risking this for me?" I asked, still not moving toward the open door. Every instinct screamed trap, setup, another layer of the conspiracy that had already stolen 3 years of my life and destroyed my family's faith in the justice system. Because my brother Carlos was the real killer. Morrison's crew paid him $50,000 to murder Lang and frame you. Carlos bragged about it when he was drunk 3 weeks ago. Thought it was hilarious that some innocent guy was rotting in prison for his work. Her face hardened with a mixture of grief and rage. "They found him dead yesterday morning. Heroin overdose, they claim. But Carlos was clean for 4 years, had been working construction, trying to turn his life around after getting out of county lockup. The corridor was too quiet. No guard chatter, no keys jangling, just fluorescent lights humming overhead and someone crying in another block. The kind of silence that meant something was about to go very wrong, that the normal rhythms of institutional life had been deliberately disrupted. In 3 years, I'd never heard the prison this quiet during shift change. Carlos wasn't just bragging about your case," Denise continued, her voice getting more urgent. "He was providing details about dozens of other murders, other frame jobs, other innocent people who had been sacrificed to protect Morrison's network. He knew about judges taking bribes, prosecutors hiding evidence, cops planting drugs and weapons. They couldn't let him keep talking." She checked her watch with shaking hands. "I end my shift in 12 minutes. My replacement is Officer Frank Kowalski, who's been on Morrison's payroll for 6 years. The same man who beat inmate Rodriguez to death last year and made it look like gang violence. Once Kowalski gets here, they're going to eliminate you, probably make it look like you attacked me during rounds." I stared at the flash drive in her trembling hand. Such a small device to contain evidence that could destroy a conspiracy reaching into the state's highest courts. But even if I believed her, even if the evidence was genuine, walking out of this cell meant becoming a fugitive. Everything on that drive would be dismissed as fabrication by a desperate escaped convict seeking revenge against the system that had rightfully imprisoned him. "Rebecca had multiple contacts," Denise said, reading the doubt in my eyes. "Not just local FBI, but federal prosecutors, journalists, civil rights attorneys. She'd been building a network of people who couldn't be bought or intimidated. Agent Lisa Park was her primary contact, but there were backup plans, other people who could verify the evidence independently." The sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor, getting closer with each second, keys jingling with each step. Someone whistling an old country song I recognized from my childhood, the same tune my father used to hum while working in his auto repair shop before the cancer took him. Denise quickly stepped back from my cell, trying to look professional, as Officer Frank Kowalski appeared at the far end of the corridor, 20 minutes early for his shift. "Everything secure down here, Tran?" His voice bounced off the concrete walls like a physical threat. Former Army Rangers, built like a linebacker, with the casual menace of someone who'd learned to enjoy violence in places where nobody asked questions about dead prisoners. I'd heard stories about Kowalski from other inmates, whispered accounts of beatings in isolation cells, of prisoners who went to medical with mysterious injuries after encountering him alone. "Just finishing my final rounds," Denise replied, her voice steady despite the terror I could see in her eyes. She pulled my cell door closed, but I heard the mechanism click without the deadbolt fully engaging. A subtle sound that meant escape was possible, but also meant I'd have to choose between safety and justice in the next few seconds. Kowalski walked closer, his whistling stopping as he studied Denise's face with the attention of a predator evaluating prey. "Warden wants to see you before you clock out. Something about your incident report from last week, the one involving inmate Vasquez here." The lie was smooth and practiced, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd fabricated official business many times before. "Which incident?" Denise asked, though we both knew no such report existed. She was stalling, trying to buy me time to make a decision that would determine whether I died anonymously in a prison cell or lived long enough to expose the truth about David Lang's murder and the dozens of other crimes Morrison's network had committed. The one where he threatened you during meal service, made some pretty serious comments about what he'd do if he ever got out. Very concerning behavior from someone who's supposed to be model prisoner. Kowalski was positioning himself between Denise and the corridor exit, his hand resting casually on his baton, the same baton that had allegedly been used to crush Rodriguez's skull, though the official report blamed his death on a fight with other inmates. Actually, let's walk up to the administrative building together. I want to make sure we're on the same page about what happened. Need to coordinate our stories before the state investigators arrive next week. Kowalski's smile was cold, predatory, the expression of someone who enjoyed the moment before violence began. Can't have any inconsistencies in our reports, you understand. I watched through my cell window as they started walking toward the elevator, Denise slightly ahead, Kowalski close behind her like a hunter stalking wounded game. She'd given me a chance at freedom, but at the cost of her own life. In 10 minutes, maybe 15, her body would be found in some maintenance area. Another prison employee who couldn't handle the stress of working with violent criminals, who'd taken her own life rather than face another day in this concrete hell. But then I noticed something that changed everything. Denise's left hand was behind her back, making subtle gestures as they walked. Sign language, the same basic signals my deaf cousin had taught me during childhood visits. She was spelling out words FAKE, RECORDING, TWOMINUTES. The cell door was unlocked. The corridor was empty. But now I understood that Denise's apparent capture was part of a larger plan, that she was buying time for something else to happen. Federal agents, maybe, or journalists with cameras. Someone was coming. Someone who could document whatever was about to unfold in this prison. Every rational thought told me to stay put, to wait for morning, to serve out my remaining 11 months and take my chances with the parole board. But Rebecca Stark was dead, killed for trying to prove my innocence. Carlos Tran was dead, eliminated because his conscience had started bothering him. If I stayed in this cell, I'd be next. Another convenient accident that would close the final loose end in Morrison's conspiracy. I pushed the door open and stepped into the corridor, immediately feeling the weight of invisible cameras tracking my movement. But Denise had signaled that those recordings were fake, probably loop footage designed to hide whatever was really happening on this cell block tonight. The real question was whether I was walking into rescue or execution. The floor plan was burned into my memory after 3 years of studying every detail during my work assignments. Kitchen duty, laundry detail, maintenance crew, library assistant. I'd mapped every camera angle, every security checkpoint, every blind spot in the institution's surveillance network, not because I'd planned to escape, but because understanding my environment was the only way to survive in a place where guards and inmates were equally dangerous. But tonight, something was different. The usual night sounds were missing. No guards talking at their stations, no radios crackling with routine communications, no inmates calling out to each other between cells. Millbrook housed 1,200 prisoners across 4 cell blocks, and the silence was unnatural, orchestrated. I made it to the main corridor junction without encountering anyone, which should have been impossible. The central hub was always monitored, always staffed with at least 2 guards during every shift. Security cameras covered every angle, motion sensors tracked movement, electronic locks prevented unauthorized access to sensitive areas. That's when I saw the first body. Officer Murphy was slumped in his chair at the central security desk. Blood pooled around his head where someone had struck him with a blunt weapon. His radio was missing, his keys gone, his weapon still holstered, which meant he'd been surprised by someone he trusted. The security monitors were displaying what looked like normal corridor footage, but the timestamp showed the feeds were 3 hours old. This wasn't an escape opportunity. This was a massacre in progress, systematic elimination of witnesses who might have known about the evidence Rebecca Stark had gathered. Morrison's people weren't just covering up past crimes anymore. They were destroying everyone who could testify about the corruption network. I heard footsteps in the distance, multiple people moving through the prison with military precision. Not guards responding to an emergency, but professionals executing a predetermined plan. I looked around desperately for somewhere to hide and spotted an open maintenance door that led to the prison's underground service tunnels. The tunnel system was a maze of pipes, electrical conduits, and ventilation shafts that connected every building in the complex. I'd learned about it during my stint on the maintenance crew, when I'd helped repair heating systems and install new security equipment. The tunnels were poorly lit and rarely monitored, designed for utility access rather than human passage. I crawled through the narrow spaces, trying to orient myself toward the administration building where backup communications equipment might still be functional. Behind me, I could hear voices echoing through the prison, professional whispers coordinating a systematic search of every cell, every room, every possible hiding place. All blocks secured, a voice said, close enough that I could make out the words clearly. 17 targets eliminated so far, still looking for the primary objective and the guard who compromised our timeline. 17 dead. That meant Morrison's cleanup crew hadn't just come for me and Denise. They'd killed every guard, every administrator, every inmate who might have known about the corruption investigation. This wasn't witness elimination anymore. This was mass murder designed to destroy all evidence of the conspiracy. I reached a junction in the tunnel system where several passages converged near the prison's main power distribution center. Through a ventilation grate, I could see into the electrical room where someone was working on the main control panels. Not maintenance staff performing routine repairs, but someone systematically destroying security systems and communication equipment. The figure looked up from the control panel, and I recognized the face from newspaper photos. Deputy Warden Vincent Pierce, the man who'd been running day-to-day operations at Millbrook for the past 5 years. The same man who'd denied every one of my grievances about threats from other inmates, who'd refused to investigate suspicious deaths, who'd blocked Rebecca's attempts to interview prisoners who might have had information about my case. Pierce wasn't just covering up corruption, he was orchestrating it from inside the prison system, working with judges and prosecutors to ensure that inconvenient witnesses never survived long enough to testify, that evidence disappeared before it could reach federal investigators, that anyone who asked too many questions had accidents or committed suicide. I watched through the grate as Pierce finished his work on the electrical system. The lights throughout the prison flickered and died, leaving only emergency lighting to illuminate the corridors. But instead of activating backup communication systems, the power failure seemed to trigger something else. Alarms that should have summoned outside help remained silent. Electronic locks that should have secured the facility stayed open. Pierce pulled out a radio and spoke in code phrases that sounded like military communications. Package secured, facility isolated, cleanup teams have 20 minutes before scheduled power restoration. Then he paused and added something that made my blood freeze. Federal interest confirmed. Agent Park's cover was blown 3 hours ago. Initiate Phoenix Protocol. Phoenix Protocol. That sounded like a complete destruction plan, something designed to eliminate all evidence and witnesses while making it look like a prison riot or system failure. But who was Agent Park? And why did her blown cover trigger such an extreme response? I needed to get out of the tunnel system, needed to find working communications equipment, needed to contact someone outside Morrison's network who could stop this massacre before it was completed. But the only way out led through the administration building, where Pierce and his team were coordinating the operation. I crawled toward the administration section, following pipes and cables through increasingly narrow passages. The air was thick with dust and the smell of electrical fires from damaged equipment. Every few minutes, I heard gunshots echoing through the prison, presumably the execution of anyone who'd survived the initial sweep. The tunnel ended at a service access panel that opened into the warden's office complex. Through the ventilation system, I could hear multiple voices coordinating different aspects of the cleanup operation. Computer hard drives being destroyed, paper files being burned, physical evidence being removed from the scene. But I also heard something unexpected. Agent Lisa Park's voice, speaking with authority and giving orders to the tactical team. She wasn't a victim of the operation, she was running it. The FBI contact Rebecca had trusted was actually coordinating the cover-up, ensuring that all evidence of Morrison's network would be destroyed, along with everyone who knew about it. Status report on primary targets, Park said into her radio. Vasquez and the guard who helped him? Still searching, came the reply. Security footage shows them moving toward the administration building, but we lost visual when Pierce cut the main power. Teams are sweeping the underground areas now. I was trapped in the ventilation system with professional killers hunting me through every passage and corridor, but I could hear their communications, which meant I might be able to anticipate their movements and find a way to escape the prison before they completed their search. Then I heard footsteps directly above me, someone entering the warden's office. Through the ventilation grate, I could see Agent Park studying building schematics and coordinating search patterns with her team. But she wasn't alone. Judge Morrison himself was there, along with 2 men I didn't recognize but who carried themselves like federal agents. This should never have gotten this far, Morrison said, his voice carrying the authority that had dominated my trial 3 years ago. One idealistic lawyer, one corrupt guard, and suddenly our entire operation is exposed. How did Rebecca Stark get access to financial records that were supposed to be sealed? She had help, Park replied, pointing to documents spread across the warden's desk. Agent Sarah Chen from Internal Affairs has been running a parallel investigation, building cases against everyone in our network. Stark was feeding her information, using official FBI channels that we couldn't monitor or intercept. Agent Chen. A name I'd never heard before, but apparently someone who'd been working to expose the corruption while Park worked to conceal it. If Chen was still alive, if she had copies of Rebecca's evidence, then Morrison's cleanup operation might fail even if they killed everyone in the prison tonight. Where is Chen now? Morrison asked. Unknown. She disappeared 6 hours ago, right around the time Stark was supposed to deliver her final evidence packet. We're assuming she has everything, which is why we activated Phoenix Protocol. Park checked her watch. In 15 minutes, this facility will suffer a catastrophic electrical fire that kills everyone inside. The official investigation will find that faulty wiring caused a power surge that ignited chemical storage areas throughout the complex. I had 15 minutes to escape a building filled with professional killers and planted incendiary devices. But even if I survived, even if I made it outside the prison walls, I'd still be a fugitive with no proof of my innocence. Everything depended on whether Agent Chen had survived and whether she could get Rebecca's evidence to prosecutors who weren't part of Morrison's network. The ventilation shaft continued past the warden's office toward the prison's vehicle maintenance bay, where emergency exits led to the outside world. But the passage was even narrower here, barely wide enough for a human body, and I could hear search teams moving through the tunnels behind me. I crawled forward as quickly as possible, ignoring the pain in my knees and elbows as they scraped against metal edges and concrete surfaces. The air was getting thicker with smoke from fires that had been set throughout the prison, making it harder to breathe and harder to see in the emergency lighting. Halfway to the maintenance bay, I heard voices directly below me in one of the service corridors. Two men discussing their search pattern, methodically checking every possible hiding place in the underground sections. Their conversation was professional, routine, like discussing any other work assignment. Found 3 more guards in the Eastern Bloc. Pierce wants them staged with the inmates to make it look like they died trying to maintain order during the riot. One of the voices had a slight accent, possibly military or law enforcement background. What about the missing evidence? The drive the guard was supposed to pass to the prisoner? The second voice was younger, nervous, someone new to this kind of operation. Doesn't matter. Even if they had copies, everyone who could testify about what it contains will be dead in 10 minutes. Chen can have all the evidence she wants, but without witnesses to verify it, prosecutors will treat it as fabricated revenge fantasies from dead criminals. I reached the maintenance bay access panel and carefully pushed it open, trying not to make noise that would alert the search teams to my location. The vehicle bay was dark except for emergency lighting, filled with prison transport vans and maintenance trucks that were never used at night. But the bay wasn't empty. Denise Tran was there, very much alive, working on something near the main exit. She looked up when she saw me emerge from the ventilation system, and her expression was a mixture of relief and urgency. "Thank God you made it this far," she whispered, gesturing for me to join her near the exit door. "We have maybe 5 minutes before they complete their sweep and detonate the incendiary devices." "I thought Kowalski killed you," I said, crawling over to where she was working on what appeared to be an electronic device connected to the door's security system. "I managed to get away when the power went out. Kowalski's dead, along with most of the other guards. This whole thing is bigger than we thought, Antonio. They're not just covering up your case. They're destroying evidence of hundreds of cases going back years." She finished her work on the electronic device, and the exit door clicked open. But instead of leading to freedom, the opening revealed Agent Sarah Chen waiting outside with a team of federal marshals, all heavily armed and wearing tactical gear that identified them as FBI response units. "Mr. Vasquez," Chen said, stepping forward with her hands visible and her weapon holstered. "I'm Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Internal Affairs. I've been working with your attorney Rebecca Stark to expose Judge Morrison's corruption network, and I need your testimony to complete the prosecution." I stared at her in confusion. "Everyone said you disappeared 6 hours ago. Agent Park told Morrison you were missing. Agent Park has been feeding false information to Morrison's network while I coordinated this operation with federal prosecutors and U.S. attorneys from outside the state." Chen gestured toward her team. "We've been planning this raid for months, waiting for Morrison to activate his cleanup protocol so we could catch him in the act of destroying evidence and eliminating witnesses." The sound of helicopters filled the air as additional federal units surrounded the prison. Spotlights blazed through windows, loudspeakers announced that the facility was under federal control, tactical teams prepared to arrest everyone involved in the massacre. "But what about Agent Park?" I asked. "I saw her coordinating the cleanup operation, giving orders to the tactical team that's been hunting me." Chen smiled grimly. "Agent Park has been working undercover for 18 months, pretending to be corrupted while actually documenting every aspect of Morrison's network. Every order she gave tonight was recorded, every conversation was monitored, every crime was witnessed by federal agents who can testify in court." The pieces started fitting together. Rebecca's death had been staged to force Morrison into desperate action. My escape had been orchestrated to trigger his Phoenix protocol. The entire night had been an elaborate trap designed to gather evidence of crimes that couldn't be denied or explained away in court. But the cost had been enormous. 17 people were dead, killed by Morrison's cleanup crew during their systematic elimination of potential witnesses. Guards, administrators, even inmates who might have known something about the corruption investigation, all murdered to protect a network that was now being dismantled by the very federal agents Morrison thought he controlled. "What happens now?" Denise asked as we were escorted toward waiting FBI vehicles. "Now we begin the largest public corruption prosecution in state history," Chen replied. "Judge Morrison, Deputy Warden Pierce, and 43 other officials will face federal charges for racketeering, murder, conspiracy, and violation of civil rights. Your brother's testimony about the murders he committed was recorded before his death, and that evidence will be used to identify other victims of the network." I climbed into the FBI vehicle, my legs shaking from adrenaline and the surreal nature of what had just happened. Through the window, I could see the prison where I'd spent 3 years, now surrounded by federal agents and emergency vehicles responding to what would become known as the Millbrook Massacre. The debriefing lasted 14 hours over 2 days. I provided testimony about my original arrest, the planted evidence, the trial that had been rigged from the beginning. Other victims came forward as news of the investigation spread, people who'd been framed or whose family members had been murdered to protect Morrison's network. Rebecca Stark was indeed alive, having been placed in protective custody when the investigation reached its final phase. She explained how she'd been feeding information to multiple federal agencies, building a case that couldn't be compromised by corruption within any single office or jurisdiction. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth," she said during one of our meetings. "But we needed Morrison to believe he was successfully eliminating all threats to his network. Your reactions had to be genuine, or the undercover operation would have been exposed." The trials began 8 months later and continued for over a year. Morrison received life without parole for racketeering and conspiracy to commit murder. Pierce got 30 years for his role in the prison massacre. Agent Park, whose undercover work had been crucial to the investigation, was promoted to head the FBI's public corruption unit. But the personal cost was staggering. My mother had died during my imprisonment, never knowing that her faith in my innocence had been justified. My father's auto repair business had been destroyed by the stress and expense of my legal battles. Relationships with friends and extended family had been shattered by 3 years of assuming I was guilty of murder. The state offered a settlement of $18 million for wrongful imprisonment, along with formal apologies from officials who claimed they had been deceived by Morrison's network. I accepted the money, but rejected the apologies, knowing that institutional failures had made the corruption possible in the first place. I used the settlement to establish the David Lang Memorial Foundation, named after the prosecutor whose murder had been used to frame me. The foundation investigates wrongful convictions, provides legal support for people trapped in corrupt judicial systems, and works to identify patterns of abuse that span multiple jurisdictions and agencies. Denise Tran became the foundation's chief investigator, using her insider knowledge of prison systems to identify other cases where evidence might have been fabricated or witnesses eliminated. Agent Chen joined our advisory board after retiring from the FBI, bringing decades of experience investigating official corruption. 5 years later, the foundation has helped exonerate 67 people who were wrongfully convicted, most in cases involving corrupt judges, prosecutors, or law enforcement officials. We've identified networks of abuse that span multiple states and jurisdictions, criminal conspiracies that have operated for decades under the protection of badges and judicial robes. The work is dangerous. We receive death threats regularly. Our offices have been burglarized twice, and several of our investigators have been followed by unknown individuals who disappear when confronted. But we've also built relationships with honest prosecutors, ethical judges, and federal agents who share our commitment to justice over political convenience. Rebecca Stark returned to private practice, but continues to work with the foundation on complex cases involving institutional corruption. She's become one of the leading experts on judicial fraud, testifying before Congress about the need for stronger oversight of state and local courts. Sometimes I think about that moment when Denise opened my cell door and offered me freedom that looked like death, how close I came to staying safe in my cell, while Morrison's network continued destroying lives and corrupting justice. How many other innocent people might still be trapped in similar situations, victims of systems that prioritize convenience over truth? The work continues because corruption continues. Every day brings new cases, new evidence of official misconduct, new opportunities to prove that institutional failures can be overcome by individuals willing to risk everything for principle. It's not always successful, and victory often comes at terrible personal cost, but it's necessary work. I still wake up sometimes expecting to see prison walls, still check over my shoulder when walking alone at night, still wonder how many other Morrison networks are operating in jurisdictions we haven't investigated yet. But I sleep better knowing that the evidence Rebecca died to protect has freed dozens of innocent people, that the system which failed me has been forced to become more accountable. The foundation now operates in 12 states, with investigators, attorneys, and researchers who specialize in different aspects of wrongful conviction. We've helped change laws governing evidence preservation, witness protection, and judicial oversight. Most importantly, we've shown that even the most powerful criminal networks can be dismantled when honest people work together toward justice. Every exoneration represents not just one life saved, but a family restored, a community educated, a system forced to acknowledge its failures. The work honors everyone who died trying to expose corruption, from David Lang to the guards murdered during the Millbrook massacre, by ensuring their sacrifices contribute to a more honest justice system.